Welcome to the Right Time Podcast. The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Welcome to the Right Time with Bomani Jones on ESPN Radio. We're presented by Progressive Insurance, and all guests on the Right Time appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Get in touch with me through the 1-800-Flowers Twitter feed, at ESPN Radio, at Clinton Yates. Reminder, if you come at me crazy in my mentions, I will embarrass you in front of your friends and your family. Just understand that. I'm Clinton Yates, filling in for Bomani Jones here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in on a Monday. I'll be here all week. I'll be in New Orleans starting on Wednesday. So get used to it. Right now, though, we're going to talk about my man, Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler signed with the Miami Dolphins, moved on down the road to Florida, caught up with his old coach, Adam Gase. Had a good little year in 2015. It was Cutler's best year ever. About $10 million, they slid him. Didn't go with Kaepernick. Different discussion. We'll get to that later. But he showed up today at that press conference looking like the most disinterested man in the world, which is exactly why I love Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler is one of my favorite people in the NFL. Total jerk, does not seem to care about anything, rocket arm, no real success to speak of, but seems to act with disdain about every single thing in the world. I don't know why I find this so funny. I love the idea of Miami Jay. Shannon, I'm calling him Tony J.O. That's what I'm calling him.
That is.
I love the idea of him down here in the white blazer. He needs to slick back the hair, chilling out on Collins, your old hood, Shannon, with, the Testarossa out. I love the idea of Miami Jay out there stunting. He said his wife wanted to get him out of the house. That was his main reason to come back. So what's he going to do? He's going to show up and give the people what they want, as Jalen Rose would say. Jay Cutler in these streets in Miami is what a guy like me loves about the NFL. Ballers season 4, if you will. I don't really care about the football, mainly because the Dolphins ain't much. Anybody think that team's going to the playoffs? Doubtful. They got issues, and that's fine. But when you got to bring in a Jay Cutler, your team's not so great. But it's going to be a fun story. Let's hear what Jay Cutler had to say about this whole situation. He said he's not really sure if it's going to start. No guarantees.
No guarantees. I just kind of come here to help and, get back into football. We'll kind of see how it goes.
That doesn't sound like a guy who's ready to come in and start slinging the ball around as a starter. That sounds like a dude who's doing someone a favor.
How do you rally around someone who says that? We'll see what happens. Making no guarantees. If we make the playoffs, make the playoffs. If we don't, man, we don't. That's very meh.
Right. That's what your plumber says when he shows up to fix your toilet and can't figure out what's wrong with it. That's not what your quarterback says when he's supposed to be leading your team down the field. Let's hear from Jay again on why he took the job.
A situation like this, just doesn't come along very often. I know Adam very well. I've known him since 2006, the first year I came out. I know the system. You're talking about a playoff team with a lot of really, really good football players, a lot of potential. So it was one of those things that there weren't a lot of opportunities or jobs out there. If they would have came up, I would have taken, but this has got to be the top of the list.
Yeah, no, that situation doesn't come across very often, where you randomly retire, decide you're going to go into the broadcasting booth, and then pop back out to head down to Miami. Of course that doesn't happen, because quarterbacks just don't retire like that and then decide they're going to go into the booth and come back. Jay is such an interesting character to me. A lot of people really don't like him. People didn't like him going back to his days at Vanderbilt. People didn't like him in Chicago. There's that great bit of him, smoking Jay Cutler, which I love. But there is something particularly fascinating about his level of general disinterest when it comes to the NFL. You hear so many stories about dudes who, you heard that one kid say the other day, I'd die for this, that, and the third. Guys who talk about going to the wall at all times for their teammates and so forth. Jay's just not that dude. He's here to get these checks and stay in the streets. I absolutely love it. He delayed his broadcast career, by the by, to come do this. Let's hear what he had to say about that particular portion of the situation.
It was hard. It was definitely hard. Like you said, the last 4 months I've been in a different mode, different mindset, getting ready for the Fox deal. And it was really, pretty good with where I was in my life. I was around the kids a lot, felt pretty content. So weighed back and forth on this. I'd probably say my wife, Kristen, probably talked me into it more than anybody else could.
You're listening to The Right Time with Bomani Jones. Clinton Yates filling in here on a Monday. That was Jay Cutler. The thing is, we get robbed of Jay in the booth, though, too, Shannon. some people were looking forward to this. Mina Kimes and I were talking about that on our show Sunday morning, the Morning Roast. And she was really looking forward to Jay in the booth. And I hadn't even really thought about that. Because as much as, that was news or whatever, I wasn't super gung-ho on what he was going to be. And I didn't really know what we were going to get. Was Jay going to be one of those guys that didn't want to talk bad about his old teammates? Was he going to be one of those dudes that brought this level of disinterest to the booth? You didn't really know. I'm not quite sure that I'm going to miss that much, but it will be interesting to see if he chooses to go, how he chooses to go back to the booth. Let's just say he has a terrible year. Or let's just say, I don't know, some miracle happens and the Dolphins win the Super Bowl. Does he go back to broadcasting immediately? I really wonder how that's going to go. Lastly, from Jay Cutler on, this career change.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing you kind of have to process there is, I think everyone probably in the room kind of forecasts what they're going to be doing in, a week from now, a couple weeks, a month, and, you kind of have that in your mind of what's going to happen. We're going on vacation this week, and then, we start up the Fox thing, we had to do the preseason game, so, my son's birthday's tomorrow. So, there was things, you just kind of have planned in your life, and to get something like this thrown, it takes a little bit to kind of process it and figure out what direction you want to go.
I can't get over his tone of voice, Shannon. He legitimately sounds like he does not want to be there at all.
Which, to your point, while I'm disappointed that we're not going to get him in the booth this year, because I wanted to hear him say some really, really positive things about whomever, just so he can say it in that meh voice. He's really doing a great job of reading the defenses there, and that pass, not too many guys in the league could make that pass.
Right. I'm like, if you're a Dolphins fan, give me a phone call. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Are you inspired by this on any level? You can't be. There's a picture going around Twitter right now of just the look on his face. People talking about he looks like a fifth-year senior who's got to come back because he didn't complete his core requirements. Stuff like that. He's just standing on stage, idly staring off into the distance. If you're wondering, by the way, specifically, under Adam Gase's guidance in 2015, Cutler posted one of the better seasons. He completed 64.4% of his passes and 7.6 yards an attempt. 21 touchdowns, 11 picks. Best season. But he doesn't sound like he's pumped about this. I'm thinking it's going to be different. I was expecting Jay to be fired up. He's got the band back together. You go buy a new car. He's got $3 million in extra incentives on top of that little $10 million deal. I was expecting him to be showing out, looking like your man Don Johnson. Nah. He showed up like a kid who realized that he's going to the library on a field trip during summer camp instead of to the pool. No knock on libraries. I'm just saying, my man does not sound hyped. And this makes me very upset because I need Miami J to be a thing. Let's hear what Adam Gase had to say about his confidence in his new quarterback.
After watching last year, I saw basically the same stuff. He got injured, and they decided to move on from him, and then he stepped away for a minute. And I feel good, where he was at the last couple of years, and I feel good about how he kind of fits in with us.
Do we think this was the right move for the Dolphins? Did they get the right guy? From a football standpoint, 888-SAY-ESPN, that's 1-888-729-3776. Again, this man just got paid $10 million to go live in Miami and potentially play football for the Dolphins. And he sounds like he could not be bothered. Like he's got to go out and change his parking meter. Dolphins fans, you can't be excited about this. Who's your quarterback going to be? You want listless Jay Cutler? There's Matt Moore, the other guy down there. Tannehill can't stay on the field. This is not a good sign in Miami. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 1-888-729-3776. Brian in Indiana, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm well.
So yeah, my opinion of it is I think Cutler's no worse than Tannehill, and this is probably a blessing in disguise because Tannehill will do $23 million next year. We got a reason to cut him now. No need to keep investing in an average quarterback. The way I look at it as it's actually a positive thing. I'm not a Cutler fan by any means, but if it helps us move on from Tannehill, then so be it.
Thanks for the phone call. That's an interesting way to look at that. If you don't like Tannehill, this is a good little stopgap to just get him on out the door. Fair enough. Guy can't stay on the field. Guy can't stay on the field. He's got a big old contract. 1-888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Barry in Florida. You're on the right time.
Hi, how's it going? Sorry, I know you're not supposed to do that. No, I was calling because you're talking about Cutler, but I'd rather have Cutler's contract than all the chaos that would come with Kaepernick. And then Tannehill, like the other guy said, he's been hurt all the time. He's done nothing. So we are so much better off.
All right. Thanks for the phone call. Dolphins fans like this move. I like it too.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Clinton Yates filling in here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. I'm here all week, kiddos. Been talking about the Miami Dolphins. They got Jay Cutler, but that wasn't the only guy they considered. This story gets more and more fascinating for a team that is ultimately middling. The Miami Herald, Armando Salguero, reported that the other names that were considered before Cutler became the newest quarterback were, wait for it, Kyle Orton and Timothy Tebow. Tim Tebow. Yes, that Tim Tebow. Peanut butter Tebow time. The guy who's actually playing baseball in the Mets minor league system was under consideration. Mind you, Gase was their position coach in Denver, so there's some understanding there. But if you're telling me that you've got to go so far past Kaepernick to get to Tebow, I'm not sure that's something you want people knowing. Gase, I get it. You've got a personal connection to this guy. But if the Miami Dolphins were seriously considering, on any level, trying to snag Tim Tebow, I'm sorry. Clowntown franchise. What are you doing? There's just no way that they could have seriously not gotten laughed out of the league from a personnel standpoint had that ever come to fruition. Now, look, I understand the Colin Kaepernick situation. It's not an easy one. It's a separate story in Miami because of the T-shirt he wore and the message it sent about Fidel Castro. Kaepernick going to Baltimore is a completely different story than Kaepernick potentially going to Miami. Let's hear what Dan Le Batard had to say on Mike and Mike about it this morning.
I wanted Colin Kaepernick as the quarterback here. My parents did not want Colin Kaepernick as the quarterback here. And there is some generational differences but the dying generation is the one that has the most reason and the most pain inflicted by Castro. And so you have a lot of Cuban Americans like me who have grown up in this country, who've become Americanized, who've learned to think for ourselves because of the freedom that these exiles brought us. And so I don't agree with my parents on this. But what you're alienating would be an older Cuban and the younger Cubans who defend the passions of the older Cubans emotionally instead of rationally, because I will side with my parents on their pain over all else, no matter what it is that I believe. But in this particular case, I like Colin Kaepernick's skill set for the Miami Dolphins. So I would have taken him ahead of Cutler, personally. But there's a lot of arguing back and forth about who's better, Jay Cutler or Colin Kaepernick. But the Cuba issue is an interesting one because I do think that the Miami sports fan would be myopic enough that if Jay Cutler goes down and they're looking at a season of Matt Moore, they might put their ethnicities and their politics aside to cheer for Colin Kaepernick.
This is fascinating to me. Because this is almost a tougher situation, and by almost, I mean definitely a tougher situation in Miami than I think him kneeling for the national anthem is in a lot of places. The legacy of Fidel Castro in Miami is a very specifically painful one, as Dan Le Batard just described. Now, even though you might be offending only sort of, as Dan put it, an older fan base, I don't know. That sends a different message culturally than it does to bring him in after what happened with the national anthem. I personally think that wouldn't fly. I don't know that Colin Kaepernick can get up there and just sort of apologize that away and then re-ingratiate himself to that fan base. For me, it's not that simple. But overall, I just don't get where the Dolphins were on this. Kyle Orton? Tim Tebow? And you end up with Jay Cutler of all people? Look, I'm not going to act like I'm some Dolphins insider, but their QB plan is a massive disaster right now. 1-888-SAY-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Clinton Yates filling in here for Bomani Jones on the right time on ESPN Radio. I'm here all week. I want to know what your thoughts are on this Dolphins fan. Are you excited about this? Do you feel good knowing that Peanut Butter Tebow Time's name came up? 1-888-SAY-ESPN. That's 1-888-729-3776. Kurt in Wisconsin. What's good?
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it. As a true blue Packer fan, or green and gold, I should say, we were just dying to listen to Cutler call a Packer game or even a Packer-Bears game, and we kind of got robbed of that.
Thanks for the phone call. No thanks for the take. 1-888-SAY-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Jordan in Louisiana. Talk to me about Jay Cutler.
Hey, Clinton. I think Cutler should just change his jersey name to GTBW because he's also like the Bernie Madoff of NFL quarterbacks. That man has stolen everything.
Thanks for the phone call. Not a good phone call day today, Shannon. Guy's not coming stronger on a Monday. Got to come stronger than that, y'all. You can insult me, but don't come with your corny jokes because I'm not going to laugh. And if I don't laugh, that means it's not funny. You listen to The Right Time. Clinton Yates. The Right Time is brought to you by Upside. Now save big on travel and get a big gift card every trip you buy. You'll love Upside.com. That's Upside.com. 1-888-SAY-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Jordan, let's up the level here. He's in Louisiana. Oh, my bad. No Jordan.
Question for you here, Clinton. Does it seem like the Dolphins panicked here with Cutler? Now, I know that he worked with Yates, and that's well documented, but does it seem like they panicked considering the options that were available?
I don't know that I would call it a panic, but it's one of those moves where, like, okay, you know how sometimes you'll be walking down the street and you got like a bag of groceries and you slip, and there's that one moment where you think, yo, I'm going down, the groceries are going down, everything is going to be a problem, and I'm going to have wasted $50. But then you catch yourself, and there's that like quick instance where you realize, ooh, that could have been really, really, really bad, but it's not so bad. I think that's what Cutler is. Now, overall, I don't think this is anything to be proud of if you're the Dolphins organization, but I think they were this close to this being a full-blown debacle. But where does this leave us on the Colin Kaepernick discussion? Quite frankly, I'm not one of these guys who gets super fired up every single time somebody signs a quarterback who's not named Colin Kaepernick. There are people who thought he was a good fit. I don't happen to think this would have been a good fit for him. You're not going to see me out here boycotting the NFL just because Colin Kaepernick is not making a roster. As much as I might find his protest appropriate, intriguing, and necessary, I'm not in the boat at this point of the person who can't deal with the NFL because that guy's not on a roster. Call it what you want. Collusion, blackball, whisper campaign. Sure, I'll believe in that. But I've said this before. Some of these franchises have been honest with themselves about what they're doing. The Giants come to mind and the Ravens come to mind. Now, it might not have been what you wanted to hear, but basically what they said was, we can't handle this. And I don't have a huge problem with that. But don't tell me it's about football. That's where I'm on. That's what I'm on. Don't lie to me about, various numbers, because that's just not true. The fact of the matter is, if you don't want Colin Kaepernick on your team, you don't want him on your team because you don't want people to hate you because of the stance he took about police brutality in this country. And that's fine. But the Dolphins did dodge a little bit of a bullet here. Jay Cutler choosing to come back looks good. Everything feels good on the surface. Except for the fact that the one guy you picked up doesn't seem to want to play football anymore.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Thanks for tuning in to The Right Time with Bomani Jones on ESPN Radio. I'm Clinton Yates filling in here on a Monday. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. All guests on The Right Time appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. You can get in touch with us through the 1-800-Flowers Twitter feed, at ESPN Radio, at Clinton Yates. Right now, it's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. On Saturday afternoon, I was in sunny Los Angeles, California. The day before, I had appeared on Sports Nation on ESPN. Shouts out to Michelle Beal. Shouts out to Marcellus Wiley. Shouts to Amin El-Hassan. While I was there, flipped on the TV. Actually, I flipped on the ESPN app. I said, you know what? Let me watch this little NFL Hall of Fame junk. I don't really normally tune into this kind of thing, but it was a nice day. I watched probably about 3 or 4 of these speeches. Jason Taylor went a little long, but it was excellent. Kenny Easley came out the gate firing. Liked that. Seattle Seahawks safety. Say that 3 times fast. And LaDainian Tomlinson probably had the most headline-grabbing of all the speeches, if for no other reason that he used the word slavery. Now, if you've seen LaDainian Tomlinson's A Football Life, you've had a more in-depth look at sort of how his family name came to be what it is. And he described a lot of this during his speech. I thought it was excellent. It took a turn I didn't expect, not a turn I disliked. But I'm not sure that a lot of people had LaDainian Tomlinson in their pool as the guy that was going to sort of try to bring America together with what he said. Here's what he said about football being a microcosm of the U.S.
I'm of mixed race, and I represent America. My story is America's story. All our ancestors, unless we're American Indian, came from another country, another culture. Football is a microcosm of America. All races, religions, and creeds living, playing, competing side by side.
He clearly put a lot of thought into this speech. Like it was a spirited effort, for lack of a better term. And that's no knock on LT. Don't try to misconstrue what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that it was obviously a big moment for him. And I think he nailed it. Whether or not you agree with sort of what he had to say, whether or not you thought it was appropriate for the Canton stage, he was taking that very seriously. And the emotion showed on his face. Let's hear what he had to say about everyone getting the chance to be successful in this nation.
America is the land of opportunity. Let's not slam the door on those who may look or sound different from us. Rather, let's open it wide for those who believe in themselves, that anything is possible, and are willing to compete and take whatever risk necessary to work hard to succeed.
Preach, brother. LaDainian. Nice little message there. Normally you hear NFL guys talk about, where they came from, telling long stories about their childhoods that only people who know them really care about. That's not true. I'm just messing around. But LaDainian tried to go big on this one. And for a back like him, like a guy who was legitimately one of the best of his generation, that was a really classy move, I thought. I thoroughly enjoyed the fact that he did it with no hesitation, it seemed. Like his goal here was not to talk about himself. And as much as you might not like football or think football is headed down a path to extinction, LT was a pretty good cheerleader on that day. Let's hear what he had to say about bringing the nation together.
Let's choose to be for one another. My great-great-great-grandfather had no choice. We have one. Paraphrasing and humbly building upon what President Obama said, we all have to try harder, show up, dive in, and stay at it. I am asking you to believe in your ability to bring about change, to hold fast to the faith and the idea whispered by slaves. Yes, we can.
You're listening to The Right Time with Bomani Jones on ESPN Radio. I'm Clinton Yates, filling in here on a Monday, talking about the Hall of Fame induction speeches. Shannon, did you like that speech? Did you think the tone made sense for the moment, coming from a guy like LaDainian?
Absolutely. I thought it was perfect. Arguably one of the best running backs in NFL history. I thought it was poignant. I thought he took his time and made sure that everyone understood where he was coming from. I thoroughly enjoyed LaDainian's speech.
LaDainian was my favorite running back to watch of my lifetime. Y'all know me. I'm not some huge football guy, but I like dudes when they're good. And LaDainian Tomlinson had the best celebration ever. That little move where he just says, "Whop!" There you go. Take the ball. I just scored a touchdown. Mind you, I'm delineating a celebration from a dance. So don't jump in my mentions about Deion Sanders, who I'm the president of his fan club. Obviously, if you're going to go dance, you're going to go Deion. But just celebration? Like a quick move? Oh, yeah. LT. I was really impressed by him. We'd had him on Mike and Mike earlier in the week, and he did a lot of talking about football-specific stuff, and he talked about guys in the league who he thought sort of looked like him when he ran. But this was a big moment, and he handled it very, very well. I'm happy for LaDainian. It seemed like he achieved his goal and did something that probably not a lot of people thought he was going to do. As for the other speeches, Terrell Davis said a couple of interesting things. I was really, really moved when he said, at 9 years old, I had blinding headaches from football, and the only reason I kept playing was to please my dad. That was a little scary. Like, a lot of scary, in fact. Kurt Warner got up there. I mean, Kurt Warner, by the way, is he running for office somewhere? And I'm not saying that by the words of his speech, but that dude is polished. I had no idea Kurt Warner was that good of a public speaker. He was out there delivering lines like somebody who was going to ask you to join him. I was impressed with him as well. But my favorite speech, and mainly because of the man as much as what he said, was Kenny Easley. A lot of y'all don't necessarily know who Kenny Easley is because he played in an era that was rather different from all the other guys that got inducted in. 80s guy. Played safety back when you could still crack heads and that was legal. And he didn't exactly have a great history with the franchise. He wasn't one of those alums that was celebrated every single time he came back to the field. Not remotely. A guy like him probably doesn't think he's even getting in at all. And as a result, he shot his shot and he nailed it. Let's hear what he had to say during his enshrinement speech.
Please allow me this opportunity and this moment for a very serious message for which I feel very strongly about. Black lives do matter. And all lives matter too. But the carnage affecting young black men today, from random violence to police shootings across this nation, has to stop. We've got to stand up as a country, as black Americans, and fight the good fight to protect our youth and our American constitutional right not to die while driving or walking the streets black in America. It has to stop. And we can do it. And the lessons we learn in sports can help.
Blocker! I don't think anybody had Kenny Easley coming out off the top rope with that either. And sometimes, when you're discussing matters of importance, that kind of straightforward delivery from an older guy is so much better than some of the bloviating we hear on a lot of talk networks. A lot of you people in my feed think that I'm one of those people. I probably am. But he came direct with it. Started it that way. The NFL is a big-time league. And the Hall of Fame is a very popular place. That was another big delivery in a big spot.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shapes.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
I'm Clinton Yates, filling in here on a Monday. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the right time appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And you can get in touch with us through their 1-800-Flowers Twitter feed, at Clinton Yates, at ESPN Radio. Let's quickly bang a couple of these calls before we get to the baseball. 888-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Carmen, what's going on with you and your thoughts on the Dolphins?
Thanks for taking my call. You know, I understand the Cuban community's issue with Colin Kaepernick wearing that Fidel Castro shirt, but I think some of the criticism coming from outside of that community is sort of ignorant and disingenuous, because as well as, you know, Fidel Castro, his legacy and all of that is very problematic because of the human rights issues. But to ignore the impact that he had on the Afro-Cuban and also the African-American community is just short-sighted. There are a lot of older black people who really ride for Fidel Castro. That's all I really wanted to say. Thanks.
Thanks for the phone call, Carmen. 1-888-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Jack in New York, what do you think about LaDainian Tomlinson's Hall of Fame speech?
Damn. Shout out to the female caller. I hate you, Clinton Yates. Nah, I really don't. I listen to the morning roast like every Sunday.
Get to the point, anyway. Jack. All right, we lost Jack. You gonna call up the show with your weak zingers about me and my other shows? You're gonna get cut off. We ain't got time for all that foolishness. All right. Thank you for calling in, but come on, man. We got a show to do here. Anyway, today's the anniversary. The 10th anniversary of Barry Bonds hitting his 756th home run. And let me tell you guys something. Baseball is my favorite sport. Baseball was the sport I played growing up. Shannon's on my side with this as well. I'm going to tell you something right now that's simply the truth in my house and will be the truth in my household for as long as I live. Barry Bonds is the best player in the history of Major League Baseball. Period. You can at me if you like. But don't come at me with a bunch of guys that played before the game was integrated. And don't tell me a bunch of guys played during the steroid era, because last time I checked, the pitchers took them too. So if you want to knock all that out and then discuss it, we can discuss it. But I'm letting you know, Barry Bonds is the best baseball player of all time. Certainly the best hitter. Now, 756, big number in the world of baseball. People are obsessed with these large numbers. 21, 31, 61. They made a whole movie called 61. And when Bonds broke Hank Aaron's record, that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Because of who he was. The cream, the clear, head size, exploding. Now, I get that. There's a lot of sort of old school purists who viewed him as a tainted player. But like I said before, it's not like he was the only guy in the league on drugs. So if you're going to tell me that somehow it matters more to a guy who's a hitter than it does to somebody who's doing it to say, I don't know, stay out of the minors or stay up in the bullpen, that just doesn't make sense to me. If you watch the baseball, nobody can hit the ball like Barry. End of story. Let's hear John Miller's call of the historic home run from KNBR.
Bonds one home run away from history, and he swings, and there's a long one, deep in the right center field, way back there, it's gone, a home run, into the center field bleachers, to the left of the 421-foot marker, an extraordinary shot to the deepest part of the yard, and Barry Bonds with 756 home runs, he has hit more home runs than anyone who has ever played the game.
I mean, if you watched the baseball, you ain't got to be a hardcore baseball nerd like me to remember when Bonds was must-see TV. They'd cut in the games just to watch him take walks. My dude would see like one pitch a night that was hittable. And it felt like half the time he'd take it out of the yard. Like, I don't think y'all necessarily understand how difficult that is from a basic plate approach level. You know you're Barry Bonds. You know guys are going to nibble around the zone at best because half of those walks were unintentional, intentional walks as well. Let's not forget about that. Guys would walk Bonds with the bases loaded. So to stay focused through 3 to 4 ABs a night where you think you might get one pitch, dog, that's not easy. Like, don't sleep on his actual ability when it came to how he chose to swing. Bonds was a technician in the box. You mess up and make one mistake, that ball's in the drink. I've never seen anything like that. And let's not take away from his career in Pittsburgh either. Couldn't throw out Sid Bream, but that's a different discussion. Barry Bonds is the best player of all time, in my opinion. So for all you people out here that are worried about 756 and are still constantly harping about how it's a tainted record, I can tell you something. You just sound old. And there's nothing wrong with being old. I'm getting old. But I'll tell you this, man. There's not a lot of arguments to stand up against Barry Bonds in my book. There just aren't. Shannon, I don't know how you feel about this. You're a baseball guy as well. But if you're coming at me with this, oh, he was on steroids nonsense, everybody was, dog.
That's the biggest counter argument to the whole steroids thing. It wasn't just hitters, guys. It wasn't just guys who looked big and muscular. It was everybody from pitchers to folks who just wanted to get back to the players, as you mentioned earlier, the guys who wanted to stay in the big leagues who didn't want to go back down to the minors. So it was everybody. So it was widespread, and I guess this gets to a bigger macro issue. If it's time to start letting these guys get in the hall, I don't know if we have time to get into that now, but it's time, though. It was everybody. We understood what it was. There's no asterisk that's needed. It's time to start letting those guys in.
Completely agree. While mentions are blowing up with people talking about Ken Griffey Jr. is the best player of all time, no, he's your favorite player of all time. Barry Bonds is the better player. Sorry. It's just the truth. One pitch a game he would see, basically for the last 3 years of his career. You put him out every time.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Online right now, Jeff Dickerson, ESPN Nation Bears reporter, and of course, co-host of Dickerson and Hood. How you doing, Jeff?
Quentin, I'm doing great, my friend. Great to talk with you.
You too. So let's get this thing started right quick. Is this Gase-Cutler relationship really that big of a deal? Because it kind of felt like Cutler was not that interested in doing all this, judging from his body language at that presser today.
Well, that's typical Cutler, Clinton. I think Miami fans are going to have to get used to that. I mean, Jay really isn't the body language king of the world. I mean, that's kind of how it goes with him. But truthfully, though, you know, his relationship with Adam Gase for that 1 year in Chicago in 2015 was really good. I mean, Cutler, he discards offensive coordinators left and right. I mean, he went through so many play callers. And then he got Gase in 15, and he really listened to him. He respected him. Gase, as a lot of guys will say around here, kind of empowered Cutler and sort of forced him to really be a leader and become a leader on offense and be better around the guys and just be more professional. So I really do think that there is something to that relationship. Now, whether that means Cutler's going to win a bunch of games in Miami, I have no idea. But he will walk in there knowing the offense, knowing the terminology, knowing the verbiage. So from that standpoint, I can see why Gase wanted him there. It's not going to be a big transition or a big chore to get him up to speed in the playbook, which, of course, for them is a very good thing.
Jay's relationship with Chicago was an interesting one because we know the quarterback history of that franchise is mediocre at best. So is there any feeling in Chicago of, like, anger toward Jay after the retirement situation? Like, what is the feeling on the ground if you're a Bears fan about how this situation has unfolded?
You are being kind, Clinton, when you call the quarterback situation here mediocre at best. I think somewhere Sid Luckman just rolled over in his grave because he's still the best quarterback, and he was like in the 40s that ever played for the Bears. So it's interesting. So yes, it is. Boy, I could teach a course in college on just the psychology that went into Jay Cutler's relationship with the Bears fan base. It started off very negative because Bears fans we got the guy from Denver, Super Bowl, going to be a savior, and then he was god-awful his first year through 26 picks. And then there was the Packers NFC Championship game in 2010 where he suffered a legitimate injury, but I mean, it was disappointing to be one game away from the Super Bowl and not have your quarterback there. But I think the perception of Cutler flipped the longer he was in town. He actually became more of a popular figure, believe it or not, amongst the fan base. So there's not a lot of anger. And I thought there'd be anger too, but there's not a lot of anger. And this is gonna knock you off your feet, Clinton. Most Bears fans are rooting for him in Miami. You should have
That's
seen
weird.
practice today. It's crazy. It's crazy. There were Cutler jerseys in the stands today. Now, granted, the Bears have like no one on their roster this year that you want to buy their jersey. You want to buy a Mike Glennon jersey for $4.99 in the discount rack. But yeah, there's not a lot of animosity towards Cutler. I think most people actually hope he does okay with the Dolphins.
How about that, Jay? On the side of Chicago, we're talking with Jeff Dickerson, ESPN NFL Nation Bears reporter and co-host of Dickerson and Hood here on the Right Time on ESPN Radio, which is presented by Progressive Insurance. Now you can test drive Snapshot even if you have insurance with another company. See how much you can save before you switch. Let me ask you about the actual quarterback situation in Chicago right now. Mike Glennon, Mitchell Trubisky, what's going on there? The awkward night at the draft finally got the guys on the field. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be Trubisky's team for a while. I mean, Glennon's the number one. That's not going to change anytime soon. And they have Mark Sanchez here, Clinton, as the number two.
Captain White Pants.
Sanchez is here, and, Sanchez is Sanchez. He's a great guy to have around as far as being in the meeting room, but if you have to play him for a long period of time, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. I think the Bears know that. Everyone knows that. But Trubisky, look, I watch him every day. I chart his throws every day. He's got a nice deep ball. He can roll outside the pocket to his right really well. Still has a hard time sometimes taking the snap from center. And he doesn't really know what he's doing on occasion because he's still a rookie. But, I'll give the Bears credit for this one. It has not been awkward. The draft night thing was awkward because Glennon had no clue they were going to take Trubisky, so he was steamed, as you would imagine.
Right.
But they get along pretty well. It's pretty much carved out. It's going to be Glennon 1, Sanchez 2, and Trubisky 3. So there really isn't much of a quarterback controversy here, even though they took Trubisky second overall.
That's good to hear because that didn't look good. That looked like a situation where the Bears created an unnecessary level of tension in a circumstance that did not need to be. And if I was Mike Glennon, I would have probably been pretty angry about it. But you're saying going into the season, you think this is actually not going to be an issue at all, or is it simply not an issue now in training camp?
I don't think it is. I mean, they're not pushing for Trubisky to play. I mean, I think what's going to happen is, Clinton, unfortunately in Chicago, everyone gets hurt. It's just like a rite of passage. So I think what will happen is, as the season wears on, there'll probably be some injuries at quarterback, and eventually Trubisky's going to have to play. And when he gets back out there, that's it. There's no turning back. I mean, Glennon's going to make $16 million this year, but he's hardly any guaranteed money next season. He could be on his merry way after 2017. But right now, no, it's not. Hey, I came to Bears camp looking for some quarterback drama. I need something to spice up this team, and it's not here. I mean, they're all pretty good guys. They all know their roles, and for the most part, it's working pretty well in that room.
Jeff Dickerson joins us here on the Right Time on ESPN Radio. He's an ESPN NFL Nation Bears reporter and co-host of Dickerson and Hood in Chicago. Who are these guys going to throw the ball to? I know about Victor Cruz, but what's going on with that wide receiver core?
Yeah, it's a work in progress. I mean, Victor Cruz he's like a first-team All-Pro interview guy for me. I hope he makes the team. We need him. He is a great guy to talk to. Looks okay. He says the moves that he used to use in New York are working here. I haven't seen him make a ton of plays, though, in practice. Kevin White was the former 7th overall pick in 2015. Clinton's only played in 4 regular season games. He had one really good day last week, and then he complained to us afterwards that his coverage is unfair. So, who knows what's going on with Kevin White. Cameron Meredith had a pretty good season for him last year. He's definitely their number 2. They signed Marcus Wheaton to big money, even though he only played in a couple of games for the Steelers last year. It's a real crapshoot with that wide receiver group. Now, I'll tell you, I think Glennon will be throwing the ball to the tight ends a lot because they signed Deion Sims from Miami. But this Adam Shaheen, the second-round pick from Division II Ashland, when they drafted this guy, I'm like, Division II, come on, such a Bears pick. He actually can play, I think. I think you're going to be very impressed. Number 87, he's like 6'7", 270. He's made some great catches here in camp. So they'll throw the ball out to their tight ends if they have to kind of supplement the sort of, kind of work-in-progress group they have right now at receiver.
That up-tempo offense, dumping down at tight ends all the time. I'm just messing around.
Oh, yeah.
Let me ask you
the Bears are barn burners, man. That's how they do it here in Chicago.
Let me ask you a very basic question here, and I know that this is going to sound sort of idiotic to some people, but this always matters to me watching football games. Who's the best player on the team?
Best player on this team probably is Jordan Howard. Now, that's a lot to say for a second-year guy who was a 5th-round pick out of Indiana. But This is the problem, Clinton, with the Bears. There are no superstars with the Bears. It's a major, major issue. You go to Soldier Field for a Bears game, you will see Ditka jerseys. You will see Urlacher jerseys. You will see, Cutler jerseys, Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey. What do all of these guys have in common? They don't play for the Bears anymore. So it's hard, but I think Howard being second in the league in rushing yards to Ezekiel Elliott last year is probably their best overall player. They don't have a single guy, Clinton, on defense that has ever made a Pro Bowl. Not one. Not one. And on offense, their former Pro Bowlers, besides Howard, are guards. Kyle Long, Josh Sitton, people like that. So I would say probably best player is Jordan Howard at this point.
Last thing I'll ask you here, Jeff. One-word answer. It's a game we play. Legitimately one word. Will the Bears make the playoffs?
No.
He's Jeff Dickerson, ESPN NFL Nation Bears reporter and co-host of Dickerson and Hood. I told you the rules, Jeff. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Clayton. Take care.
So, the Bears season sounds like it's going to be an exciting one, Shannon. I mean, they got a bunch of guys nobody's ever heard of and Victor Cruz. Exciting.
They're going to have a 16-week-long regular season and like an extended training camp. That's what it sounds like.
Wow. They're tight ends are the exciting part of their offense. My goodness. Oh, the Bears. It's going to be a long one.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Talking a lot of Miami today. The Dolphins taking over the NFL world. Got to be the most mediocre team in the league that's managed to make this many headlines. But what can you say? Miami Jay's back. Looking very disinterested. I want to know what you guys think. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Mike in Colorado. How you doing?
Hey, Quinn. How's it going, man? Two things on the Kaepernick and Dolphins situation. First of all, active duty military, and the way I see it, you are fighting for people's right to have freedom of speech. You're not fighting for their right to stand for the flag. So if him not standing for the flag is his way to raise awareness for an issue, that's fine. I have no issue with that. However, born and raised in South Florida, Castro is a much bigger issue for me than not kneeling for the flag, because those Cubans did not have the right for freedom of speech in Cuba, in Castro's Cuba. So I think that was a much more difficult issue for the Dolphins to overcome in that situation.
Thanks for the phone call, Mike. That was a great phone call. All right, that's what we need. Bring some knowledge. I like that phone call. Thank you, Mike. 1-888-SAY-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Sean in Los Angeles. What do you think about Jay Cutler and the Dolphins?
Hey, Clinton. Hey, Shannon. Thanks for taking my call. So I've been listening for the last few months to a lot of people trying to tell me that the reason that Colin Kaepernick hasn't been signed is because of his questionable commitment to football. But I cannot imagine a more questionable commitment to football than quitting football and taking another job. And yet Jay Cutler is now the starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. So it seems like this excuse for Kaepernick being signed has been dispensed of. And we know that last week the Ravens got rid of the excuse of he's not good enough because they admitted that he's good enough to start for them, and they just don't want to sign him because of the political thing. So given all this evidence coming up, I want to find out, how are people still not admitting to themselves what's very clear right in front of our eyes, that the reason Kaepernick's not being signed is simply because of his political stance?
You want the short answer or the long answer? Just kidding, Sean. Thanks for the phone call. That was another good one. 1-888-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Dolphins camp looking crazy right now. Got Megatron showing up on the sidelines randomly just to hang out with the receivers. That's got to be awkward. Guy's probably the best football player on that field for a country mile. I don't know what he's doing there. Real awkward situation. But the Dolphins are doing the best they can. Miami J in the Ferrari on Collins Avenue. 1-888-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Abel in San Jose. What do you think about Jay Cutler?
Hey, how's it going, y'all? First-time caller, first-time listener. All I got to say about Jay Cutler is you never see a smile on his face, like ever, no matter what goes on. And I heard on NFL Live today, I think it was Josina Anderson that reported it, that his wife made him take the job. I mean, you can't pass up on that money and then go into Miami. So, I mean, of course there's no emotion coming from him. You don't want to do that. Why would you want to leave the booth and go back and get beat up every Sunday?
10 million reasons. 1-888-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Brandon in South Carolina. What do you think about the Dolphins QB situation?
Hi, just to kind of a couple callers have already stolen my thunder, but I am absolutely not a Jay Cutler supporter. I'm a longtime Chicago Bears fan. So I know what you get with Jay Cutler, which isn't a whole bunch. But to me, it's a no-brainer just because of his familiarity with Adam Gase and him. He's being kind of thrown into the pot with very little time to get ready. The Dolphins are kind of in a tough circumstance. The whole Fidel Castro thing to me just makes it a no-brainer. I think out of all the teams in the NFL, the Miami Dolphins are the one team that can really come out and say and get a free pass by saying, hey, we can't bring this guy on because of some of his political stance. I think Kaepernick can go in anywhere in the league, but sending him to Miami with the whole Fidel Castro T-shirt thing, that wouldn't be acceptable. And I think that the owner of the Miami Dolphins gets a free pass there.
Thanks for the phone call, Brandon. 1-888-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Justin in California, please tell me you actually don't have a logo of the Dolphins tattooed on your body.
Yeah, dude. I have like the vintage 80s, 70s logo tattooed on my left bicep.
Fair enough.
So
what do you think about Jay?
I actually am pretty opposite on everybody's take. I actually am kind of happy that we got Jay Cutler. This is the first time in his professional career that he has no pressure to perform well, which is actually kind of good because, we have Landry, Parker, and Stills, all who can get over 1,000 receiving yards this year. With Tannehill, you talk to every Dolphins fan, they're kind of or they love him or they hate him. So it's kind of, what you're going to get with Tannehill. With Cutler, this guy has a chance to shine in Miami, so I'm pretty happy.
Thanks for the phone call. 1-888-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Steve from Texas, flip the coin, kid. Come get destroyed. What do you think?
Hey, brother. How are you?
I'm good. What do you got?
My issue with Mr. Kaepernick is that I don't have a problem that he takes a knee. But he was given that deal by somebody else. The big thing for me is that he took it because he wanted the plight of the inner cities to be noticed. And what he didn't do was understand that there are no fathers in the inner cities. Nobody recognizes the plight of what the African American community is going through.
Thanks for the phone call. You're misinformed and you're spreading misinformation, okay? Fathers ain't got nothing to do with police officers gunning people down and not getting jail time for it. That's what we call structural problems within the judicial system. Understand that. Don't get at me with this black-on-black crime nonsense. Colin Kaepernick should be on an NFL team.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
On the line right now, my man, Master Tesfacion. He covers the Skins for the Washington Post. He's got the aux cord at all times, and he also knows what's going on with his close personal friend, Josh Norman. What is happening, Master, with this situation about the bows and arrows? I feel like we've been hearing about this for 2 seasons, and the NFL is still hating on him.
Yeah, what's going on, Clayton? Yeah, with the rule change, it allowed for players to express themselves more than they did in the last couple seasons as they try to basically cause the players to basically just get off the field and not even celebrate the touchdowns that they score. And Josh Norman, with the interception that his first career interception that he had with the Redskins last year, he did a bow and arrow because, obviously as a Redskin, he wanted to tie in the Native American celebration and ended up getting flagged for it, flagged 15 yards for it, and also got fined for it because as an offensive gesture. And so now he thought because the rules were relaxed a little bit this season that he was able to do it, but we met with the officials who came by yesterday to Redskins training camp here in Richmond. We've received further clarification saying that no, that is also outlawed as a weapon. So Josh Norman is not able to do that as much as he wants to. It's against the rules.
It seems really petty, and a lot of people have suggested that they're sort of singling him out. Do you think that there's any truth to that because of who he is and sort of what his history is with the league?
I mean, Josh Norman's always going to feel like he's being singled out. It doesn't matter what happens. If there's any sort of slight of criticism or anything, a rule that allows him not to express himself in the full manner that he wants to, he's going to feel like he's being singled out. In this particular situation, it's not necessarily singling out Josh Norman, but it's about the rule that states that players cannot do offensive weapon gestures. And Norman's counter to that is that, well, you don't allow players to do that, but you allow Tampa Bay to fire off a cannon after each touchdown score. The Patriots obviously have guys on the sideline. They're called the end zone militia, with muskets on the sideline firing off muskets after games. What's the justification in terms of why won't you allow a player to mimic a weapon, but you allow actual weapons to be fired off, even though obviously they don't have actual cannons and
right.
bullets inside muskets, but you allow those to be on the sidelines, but you don't allow the players to express themselves in that kind of manner. So that's what Norman finds perplexing. That's probably why he feels like he's being singled out, but I don't think this is necessarily just about him. It's about the hypocrisy of the NFL to not allow the players to express themselves in this manner, but they allow the cannons and the muskets on the sidelines.
You're listening to The Right Time with Bomani Jones. Clinton Yates filling in here on a Monday. Joining us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line is Master Tesfasian. He writes about the Skins for the Washington Post. All right, let's get down to the actual football here. Terrell Pryor, has this moved from experiment to project to reality? How good is this dude going to be as a wideout?
Yeah, I don't think we can call it a project anymore. I mean, what he was able to do with Cleveland was impressive in his first full season as a starting wide receiver. With all the quarterbacks they had and the absence of weapons in that offense, he was still able to record 1,000 yards. I think was very impressive. And what we've been able to see in training camp so far has also been very impressive, as you've seen a lot of fans react to some of the one-on-one catches and some of the team period sessions where he's made incredible catches on the Redskins cornerbacks. I'm still waiting to see it all on the field, though, because there's something about these training camps with the absence of physicality nowadays that it's quick for people to kind of have snap judgments off certain plays or certain practices that someone might have, but in reality, the situation is completely different when these guys are actually on the field, and that's essentially what I want to see from Pryor once they finally start putting on the pads, and not only just through the preseason, but also at the start of the regular season. Is that how is he able to gain separation on these cornerbacks once they really become physical and everything's live, and that's the biggest question that I still have on Pryor, but his playmaking ability, the physical the size that he has, the speed that he has the tools to be a really good wide receiver. It's just waiting and seeing how this process continues to go along. And at this moment right now, it's looked really well.
Master, how does Jay Gruden look? I know this is sort of a weird question, but with the situation unfolding with Kirk as far as his contract is concerned, and Jay has always been a little bit of a sort of an aw shucks kind of guy. Like, his leadership to me is an important part of this team. How do you feel he has come into this season from a preparation standpoint as the coach?
Yeah, it almost seems like in the NFL you have two type of coaches. You have coaches who are your stern, Bill Parcells, we're going to do this the right way, old football, you know what I'm saying? And then you also have guys who are player coaches like Jay Gruden who are a little bit more relaxed and allow the players to dictate and control the environment in the locker room and, allows the environment to be a little bit more loose so that way the players can kind of grow into themselves and be themselves and function as well as they can if they're comfortable in the environment. And so Jay obviously fits the latter there. And what's been surprising with as many people that have been in and out this offseason, they made a lot of moves, obviously, during free agency and getting 10 draft picks that they had during the draft. And they also had a lot of guys who left. And I feel like I was surprised throughout training camp right now about how close this team feels. Because just because of so many changes, I wasn't expecting them to feel like the sense of camaraderie that they have at this point in training camp. I thought it would have taken a little bit more time. And I don't think necessarily Jay gets as much credit for those kind of things and how he's able to relate to a lot of these players and create an environment that they feel is very enjoyable. Players obviously talk about how much they like to talk to Jay Gruden and how much they admire his style and how relatable he makes himself. So I think those are things behind the scenes that we don't necessarily get to see on the field, because on the field, obviously, you see Jay Gruden, laughing and doing all these little pranks and all these things that we saw during practice last year. So whether his performance on the field, obviously his job is safe because of the contract extension that he received at the Combine. But there's still obviously a lot of things that he needs to prove. The main thing is obviously that we haven't seen Jay Gruden have a good defense under the era that he's been with the Washington Redskins. And they have a lot of depth here this season. They have a new defensive coordinator in Greg Minuski. They're hoping that things can turn around this year, but I'm not sure if that can be a quick one-year fix. Those things usually take a year or two for them to kind of gel and mesh together.
The Washington Post, Master Tesfasian joins us here on The Right Time. Clinton Yates filling in here on a Monday. What is this Bashaud Breeland situation about? I mean, he seems like a headache. He's got shoving matches. Like, look, I know that not everybody puts a lot of stock in skirmishes in training camp because they sort of happen all the time. I had Herm Edwards on Mike and Mike last week, and he told me dudes only fight when they're tired and they don't want to do drills. What's going on with Breland?
Yeah, honestly, I think that's where Breland's at right now. Breland's a very complex individual, and it's difficult to kind of have, like, it's interesting to see the lens in which he's perceived, like, publicly and actually having a relationship with him. Breland's a good dude, and honestly, like, if anyone objectively had a conversation with him, he's a very charming guy. I mean, this guy, he goes through the autograph lines every single day, making sure every single fan that wants to get his autograph can get it. He's very personable. He comes from a very difficult background, and so I think that the different way that he was brought up can kind of clash with the way the structure of the NFL is at times, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it's just sometimes Breland's people always say that Breland's like mentally fragile, and you have to kind of separate it because from the environment that he grew up in Allendale, South Carolina, there's no way that you can be mentally fragile and come out of that environment and thrive not only just in college but also make it to the NFL. But I think there's certain circumstances where he's very sensitive at, and as we see here, he didn't talk to the media today after the little situation that he had during today's walkthrough where he got a little physical with Terrell Pryor. He wasn't really too happy. Jay Gruden told him to get another cornerback, and Breland was essentially just placed on the sideline throughout walkthrough. But Breland, it seems like he was tweeting a lot this morning about this story that came out on another site about a blog and trying to read too much into Jay Gruden's words when he was talking about Breland and his performance in camp. And it seems like Breland took it very personal, and he tends to do that at times where there seems to be these little triggers that he's very sensitive to when people criticize his style or his play, and that really eats him up. And that's only my assumption because we haven't been able to talk to him, but I would assume if you connect the dots between his expression that he had this morning on social media and the way that he acted during walkthrough, that those two areas were correlated into why this situation popped up. But he was able to get a pick six during practice. He still went over there and signed a bunch of autographs for players, to fans, excuse me. He didn't talk to the media afterwards, but Breland, as all the players always say, Breland's going to be Bree. He's not going to be someone that he's not going to be like a carbon copy of someone else. He is he's all about individuality. He's very creative, a very artistic kind of person, and that you're going to have to learn how to deal with him, and you can't deal with him the same way that you deal with Josh Norman, and that's the biggest that's the biggest point of emphasis, I feel like, for Torian Gray, the new defensive backs coach. He's got to learn how to handle all these different characters in their own individual ways, because if he tries to approach them all the same way, it's not going to work.
Right. He's Master Tisfasian. He writes for the Washington Post, and my favorite story he's written all training camp is about who's got the aux cord on the field. Thank you, Master.
Who got the aux cord? No doubt, man.
Talk to you soon. My Skins, man. I don't know how good they're going to be, but obviously they're going to be exciting within themselves because that's all they're